Hello, and welcome to this final presentation of BPC110. This lecture is one that I've put together that does not come from your textbook, but I like to give to students as they head into the final module of the course, which revolves around PowerPoint. Every student will create a final PowerPoint project in lieu of an exam, which is worth 5% of your grade. Many students choose to do the service learning project where they've attended the service learning day at SCC. But if you're choosing to do the research, that's fine. This presentation works for both. So definitely check out this presentation, and as you move forward in creating your final project, consider some of the things that I talk about. You may want to focus on some areas more than others, but it is definitely helpful advice, especially after this class is over and you're going to be creating presentations for other courses using PowerPoint. So welcome to Creating PowerPoint Presentations. A lot you need to know for college presentations, and maybe a little bit more. All right, so this overview slide is similar to what I'm expecting you to create for your own presentation. When you go through the requirements for the final project, you'll see that I require an overview or objective slide, and you're just going to tell me what you're going to talk about, list what you're going to talk about. You can design it like this. You can use any slide layout you like. You could even use a smart art. It's totally up to you. In this presentation, I'm going to talk about how you approach designing a PowerPoint. I'm going to talk about some design specifications. I'll talk about some do's and don'ts. And I have some custom animations where I have poor examples and then good examples. And then the final slide shows you the references I used, and the references are hyperlinked in the manner that I expect you to complete for your own project. They're what I call named hyperlinks. So I want the actual name of the website, not the entire URL address. And then you can create that as a hyperlink, and you do it the same way you did it in Microsoft Word. All right, so when you sit down to design any presentation, whether it's PowerPoint or any type of presentation you're going to give, you always want to ask yourself some questions before you get started. You want to know, what is the purpose of the presentation? Why am I giving it? Is it for a third grade class of art students, or is it in front of my communications class for public speaking? Answering that question will help determine and guide you in the design of the presentation, and absolutely the type of language and imagery you will use. Who is your audience? Again, are you designing for third graders where you're going to have bright colors and maybe a few words, or are you designing for a college group of students who have higher language skills? Or are you on a job interview and using PowerPoint as your portfolio? Are you speaking to potential employers? So understanding who your audience is very important before you sit down to design. For this project, for this class, for my class, your audience would be potential BPC110 students who are going to take the class. You want to educate them or inform them on your topic. So your audience is not me, your teacher who's grading it. It would actually be potential or future BPC110 students. What is the treatment? Treatment is just a fancy word for design. How do you want it to look? What types of colors? What types of themes do you want to use? And in reality, this is coming down to the theme that you choose. You definitely want to have a consistent theme. I definitely would avoid using a different theme on every slide, because that is not going to give you a consistent or professional look and feel to the presentation. And the final question you should ask is, what are the technical specifications? This comes down to when you actually present your PowerPoint. Will you be giving a PowerPoint and talking in front of the slides in a classroom? Will you have access to the internet? Do you need the internet? Do you need to click on a link? Do you need to show a video? Do you need sound? Do you need plugins? All these things you should think about ahead of time. In this class, you're going to be creating a digital story or a digital storybook for your presentation, so you won't be presenting it orally. So it's something to be viewed on the monitor. I will be grading it as I've graded all of your presentations, so you can expect that I'll be using my PC and using a computer similar to the classroom, or if you're in an online class, whatever computer you're using at home, I've been able to grade your work. I have access to the internet, so any links that you embed, I'll be able to click on and access those. And if there's sound, I do have sound on my computer. But if you were going on a job interview and maybe you needed to present your PowerPoint, are you giving them the file and you're running it on their computer? Did you build your presentation on a Mac and then it will be viewed on a PC? These are all questions you should ask yourself ahead of time so that you can consider them in your planning and then construction of your PowerPoint. So I always like to throw this slide up. Obviously, you can see there's an acronym there on the left. I apologize if that's insulting, but this is actually a real design principle. It is a graphic design principle, but it absolutely applies to digital presentations and digital work that you create. So I like to go through and talk about what each one means, and I'm going to show you some visual examples at the same time. You definitely want to think about these things as you're designing your PowerPoint slides. So the first one I like to talk about is contrast. There'll be 2 examples for each one of these design principles. So contrast deals mostly with color. What I find with students is they'll pick color combinations that they really like and they enjoy to look at, but they might not translate so well on the monitor. If you are looking at this, which obviously you would be, you'll see that that red and green is just a horrible choice of color combinations. In fact, on the monitor, the green might actually be vibrating at you. The middle one, that's really, really nice, but it's so hard to read the text. So you definitely want to create a slide that everybody can view, whether you're in a classroom or a lecture setting or just looking on the monitor. You want to be able to see the information very clearly. So the one on the right is actually a better choice because I can see that light text against a dark background. And if you actually look at the slide design principles that I've created here, you'll see that I have black text on a white background, and I've popped out contrast, repetition, alignment, and proximity with the dark red, so it's easy to see. So it's minimal design, and you definitely want everybody to be able to see what you're creating. The best thing to do is to use the design themes that are given to you in PowerPoint, especially if you're new to design. Here's another example of contrast. I find a lot of students like to use imagery in their backgrounds, which is great, but it's really hard to read that text on top of it. So you definitely want to consider how the background looks, if you really want to use a repeating background, or you just want to bring back that opacity. You want to really drag it back so it's really just kind of faint if you're going to place text on top of it. Repetition deals with repeating similar design elements. So you'll see this graphic, that big circle, little circle, it's in the same place. This would be maybe a memo and a business card and a web page. But how you would relate to it in PowerPoint is that every slide has placeholders. It has a heading and a body, and you want to use those as they're given to you. You want to leave them in the same position. When you have a page number, or excuse me, a slide number on every slide, you want that to be in the same place on every slide so that you really don't notice it, and that lends itself to more professional looking presentations. Here's another graphic I found that just kind of shows you repetition. You'll see they're actually repeating the word repetition, and you can repeat all kinds of things in design, not just text, but color, texture, sizes, lines. A lot of times in this level of a class, because we're not necessarily in a design class, we're in an office class, Microsoft Office, but you are using PowerPoint, which is a visual tool. So PowerPoint has created these themes and these slide layouts that use repeating design elements, and that will lend itself to a more professional looking presentation. All right, this image is showing you alignment, and alignment just really deals with where you place things on a slide. So if you're going to have a slide layout that doesn't, maybe the blank layout or a layout that just has a title only, and you want to place some graphics on the slide, you're trying to show something visually, you want to really consider where you place them and lining them up vertically, horizontally, centered, so that it looks neat, clean, and professional. And just by looking at these two graphics, you can kind of see the squares on the right, looks weird because they're not aligned perfectly. You can actually see a cross or a plus in the center on the left. That's what we call negative space, but you can see that a design is created with no space, with those 4 squares placed there. So you just want to think about where you place items, and PowerPoint has some really easy alignment tools. Literally, you're just going to drag your images until you see the red guidelines, and they'll help you align those objects in place. Another example of alignment, you can see that the squares on the right are so much easier to look at versus the squares on the left, which have just been placed randomly. It kind of just makes you question what's happening here. There's no cohesion to the design. And then the last one is proximity. So here's another example, which you could say is alignment because I am lining those objects up, but you can just see that the squares on the left are just slightly off. Everything is just slightly off. It almost makes it look like it's moving. I'm not going to say one is bad or good. It's just really depends on what your message you are trying to convey to your audience. So with proximity, I actually like this example where when I talk about proximity in PowerPoint, it deals with placing like or similar items together. So when you're looking at the phone number, your brain recognizes the phone number next to letter A, because I see where the dashes are. I know 312 is the prefix, versus the number on the bottom is just a string of numbers. I might not know what that means, but I recognize instantly, oh, that first one must be a phone number because of those dashes. So you definitely want to place like items together. Also, when designing your PowerPoint kind of in a grander scheme, you want to place similar concepts on the same slide. So you don't want to jam 2 different concepts onto one slide. You want to definitely just make each slide have its own concept, or if you need multiple slides for one concept, that's totally fine, but you just want to keep similar items together. All right, so in using the principles of CRAP, you definitely just remember it is subjective. I don't expect you to think about all 4 of these all the time, every time, but you definitely want to think about them as you're creating your presentation. Remember, design is very subjective, and the best way to learn what good things look like is using the internet. Literally just Google good design, good, nice looking PowerPoints, professional looking PowerPoints. And you can see what looks good and what looks bad, but it is subjective. In the end, you want your audience to be able to understand the presentation. And remember, a lot of times PowerPoint is used for talking points. You're just going to have a few words on the screen, and then the human being that's speaking is what you're focusing on. All right. So here we go. That was a custom animation, just in case you were wondering. I'm animating in the arrows in and then out. So I base these next set of slides on a series of books that I really like, which is Eat This, Not That. So if you're familiar with those, that's where this title is coming from. So my first example is going to show you a bad example of text, and you might be laughing. So there's a lot of text on this slide, and immediately I guarantee if you're listening to this presentation, you are trying to read every single thing that's on that slide. You're not even listening to what I'm saying because you're trying to read everything. And just so you know, the text in blue is random Star Trek text that I generated. It doesn't even mean anything. I'm just showing what you should not do. And I have seen this many times from students. Now, in your project, I am encouraging students to put paragraphs of text. You can talk because you are creating a digital story, but you want to be careful about how much text you want to put on the slide. You still want it to not look super crowded and super busy. Here would be a better example of that slide. I picked out a few key pieces about myself. Typically I would stand, or I'm speaking into a microphone and recording a video, and I'm like, hi, my name is Sarah Beakley-Mercill. This is my undergraduate degree is a Bachelor's of Science in Engineering. My graduate degree is Graphic Information Technology. These are the courses I teach, and these are the things that are interesting about me. So when somebody looks at the slide, it's very easy to understand the information. They can grasp it very quickly, and then they can focus their attention back on the person speaking. So again, if you're presenting something in a large lecture hall or a large room, you don't want to have too much text on the slides. If your PowerPoint is being used as a digital story or a form of lecture notes, then having more text is okay. But again, be conscious of how much text you're putting. If it's too much, Maybe you need to break up your text across 2 slides instead of 1. All right, so I love Guardians of the Galaxy. Some of you know that. if you've taken my classes, you know my password. Sometimes I make those from Guardians of the Galaxy. Love the movie, love this picture. I love colors, but this is a horrible example of using imagery. It's a good example of poor contrast. It's really, really hard to read that text on that busy background. A better example would be a layout like this. This is the picture and content layout, and where you just literally choose the slide layout, pop that picture in, and type the text on the left. And you can see that I do have 4 paragraphs of text or 4 sentences. This is okay for the project you're working on. I'm okay with something like this. It is a lot of text for maybe an oral presentation where you're standing in a classroom, but using developing this digital story, this would totally be fine for the amount of text that you want to put on a slide. So don't be afraid to try those different slide layouts. Most students stick with text and content, or body title and content, which is standard, and that's fine. It's pretty vanilla. Don't be afraid to try the other slide layouts. They're really cool, and it can jazz it up. Something else I'll point out, when you're on your own computer, so this will not work on the SCC campus. When you're on your own computer, you have the ability to turn on what are called design ideas in PowerPoint. And so when you start to build a slide, PowerPoint will immediately show you, hey, here's 5 other versions of this content with 5 different layouts. Which one do you like? You should use it. They're great. It's doing that thinking for you, that design for you. So definitely check out the design ideas on your personal computer. All right, animation. So I love this one. What I always like to say is just because you have 256 crayons in your crayon box doesn't mean you have to use all of them. So just because you can add an animation to every single thing on your slide doesn't mean you should. You definitely want to use animations where it makes sense. Typically, I used to teach art classes to elementary school students, and what I would do is I would have a slide, and I would have a question on it, and then I would ask the students what they thought the answer was, and then I would animate in the correct answers one by one. So you want to use animation as it makes sense. You don't want to overuse it. Okay, I let that go a little bit longer in my face-to-face classes, but hopefully that was super annoying to you. So you can add sound to slides. You can actually narrate your slides in PowerPoint. I'm creating this as a video, but you can actually embed audio on every slide if you wanted to narrate it. You can use sound effects that come with PowerPoint. You just want to make sure it makes sense. And remember, the more audio and video that you put into your PowerPoint, and even images, the larger the file size will become. So you just want to be aware of that. That goes all the way back to those technical specifications that you're talking about. All right. So in terms of fonts, fonts are pulled locally off the computer, and fonts fall into 2 different categories. You have what are called sans serif fonts and serif fonts. Sans serif fonts are really good to read on digital devices, on computers, on monitors, mobile phones, things like that. Here are some examples of sans serif fonts, and you'll see they're very rounded, versus serif fonts, which have these little edges on each letter. So those are the names of some sans serif fonts. Sometimes those can be harder to read in the back of the room. You will see that different themes in PowerPoint come with different fonts. My suggestion is to use the font that comes with the theme. If you wind up picking a different font, you will know that not all computers have the same fonts. So the question I would ask you is, have you ever created a PowerPoint at home and then you come to school to present it, and all of a sudden you open it up and it doesn't look right? It's totally weird looking and the fonts have been replaced. That would be because the font you picked at home is not installed on the computer you presented it on at school. If you use the fonts that come with the themes in PowerPoint, those fonts are installed on every computer. Those are the base fonts that are used everywhere. So you just have to be very careful. That's why testing your presentation before you present it is definitely important to do. So just remember, not all computers have the same fonts. Those fonts are installed locally. So wherever you open up that PowerPoint's going to look for the name of the font and pop it right into the PowerPoint. All right, imagery. Images, excuse me, images also come in two flavors, vector and raster. Vector images are created with software programs like Adobe Illustrator, think clip art. They can be resized as large as a billboard or as small as a postage stamp, and you won't lose any clarity. A raster image is based on pixels. It's usually, you take a raster images are created with cameras. That's a picture that you would take. So if you've ever noticed when you've resized an image bigger and it becomes pixelated, that's because it's based on the number of pixels that it was captured. This is usually apparent when you download an image from the internet. Those images typically are low resolution images. So I'm definitely going to be looking at how your images look. Do they look sized proportionally? If they're pixelated, I'm definitely going to be taking some points off for that. So you want to be careful and look out for that. All right, so this slide is just some do's and don'ts. It's more for, well, it works for both, whether you're doing a digital storybook or an oral presentation. Absolutely test your slides. Go to the classroom, go to the lecture hall, go to the office building if you have permission, and open up your PowerPoint, see what it looks like, and stand in the back of the classroom. It's really eye-opening to see what your presentation looks like from not sitting just behind your computer desk. Sit in the audience and look at it. Practice it and be brief. If you are doing an oral presentation, the rule of thumb is usually no more than 6 bullets per slide and no more than 6 words per bullet. Obviously, those rules can be broken. It depends on what you're trying to do. But remember, your audience, the minute you put text on the screen, the first thing your audience will do is go read that before they listen to the words coming out of your mouth. So you just want to think about that. And then pace yourself. I know personally I could speak a lot slower. I'm speaking fast because I'm trying to create a shorter video. But I do have a tendency to speak pretty fast, so you have to remember to pace yourself. Don't read from the slide. Don't turn to the slide with your back to the audience and read all the words on the slide. At this level of the game, at this stage of your life, you are adults, and the people that you're presenting to, if it's in another class with your peers, they don't want you to read to them. That's something you would do if you're teaching a class to a bunch of third graders. Then reading from the slide would make sense. Definitely don't underline or bold everything. Use large paragraphs of text. However, I'm okay with paragraphs of text for this particular project because you are doing a digital story. Make sure you have consistent colors, fonts, and themes. Don't use colors that will strain the eyes. That red and green in the very beginning for contrast, that's something that would strain the eyes. And just don't overuse animations and transitions. You want those things to be subtle and in the background. You don't want people in your audience sitting there going, "Oh my God, this PowerPoint sucks." And I'm pretty sure every single person listening to this presentation right now can think of a PowerPoint that they have seen probably last week that totally sucked. So you just want to think about what people do and don't do that. You want to be better than that. All right, this is my last slide. Here's some references that I used to create this PowerPoint. What I want you to take away from this is that the ones that are underlined are hyperlinks, and that is what a named hyperlink looks like. So you will see in the requirements for your project that I want named hyperlinks. I want the name of the text, or excuse me, the name of the website, and then hyperlink that. I don't want to see http://www.blah blah 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 blah. That's like paragraphs long. I don't want that. That doesn't look professional. It looks messy, and it makes no sense to the audience. Something like this looks a lot more professional. So that is this presentation. Definitely feel free to take this away with you in the future. I'm hoping that it not only helps you with my class, clearly, but also other classes that you're taking and creating PowerPoint presentations. Thank you for listening, and as always, please let me know if you have any questions.